And we'll come to this session about the water security, a cornerstone for economic, social, and environmental development. Africa faces a huge challenge with multiple issues that adversely affect public health. One major challenge is the ability for both rural and urban Africans to access clean water supply and appropriate sanitation service. Nearly 63% of urban area in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to basic water and sanitation. To talk about this huge matter, I'm pleased to, and honored actually, to introduce you to our great panelists, Sunil Lalvani, the founder and CEO of Project Maji. Welcome, Sunil, with us.
Thank you.
And thank you. And Galen Walsh, the co-founder of Jibu. Sunil, I will start with you. In 2014, you witnessed Ghanaian children collecting dirty water from roadside puddle. It affected you. You took really a major career-changing, and I think it is a life-changing decision, actually. You left the family business like that, and you went into asking the question and trying to find the answer why 785 million plus people lack access to basic drinking water sources. Back then, what was the answer? What is your assessment?
So, Naoufer, thank you for asking it that way. I think that there are two fundamental problems. One, and I can focus very much on the African continent, which is one of the primary places affected by this water poverty. It's bad government decisions. It is poor international support. It is a lot of corruption. It's really endemic across the continent that way. So to me, it was really up to the private sector or private sector players who either drove this directly or with public-private partnerships. But the other problem was also whatever actors were until then really playing in the field and trying to find solutions, they really weren't sustainable solutions. Certainly in the smaller communities in which we work, I mean, Galen works in bigger communities, he'll tell you about it. The smaller communities we work, the typical solution given to communities is hand pumps. And this is a solution that's been used for decades or the best part of a century. And we are still giving these people this inefficient, undignified solution. So we really wanted to come and give people a better user experience.
Yes.
But also one that was going to be reliable and sustained environmentally, financially, and mechanically.
And we will come to the solution later on because, as you said, the hand pump, we've been seeing that for decades. We are in this, 21st century, and it's not dignified to see people in Africa still using that. That is a great vision. Galen, your story is different. Now, your father at one point completed a consultation in Africa for an NGO to help them design more sustainable water project. You just came back from also Africa, from a Peace Corps mission. And together, I love this, you explored the subject of producing long-term water solution. Then you launched Jibu few months later. My question is, why there wasn't a long-term water solution? What was the problem? If I may ask, maybe the reasons are different from what Mr. Sunil just told us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So the number one reason that we identified was the lack of ownership on the ground from local entrepreneurs. So it's not really, we don't see it as a technological issue. There's incredible water technology available to solve the challenge. It's really, is there local ownership to maintain the water treatment systems and then keep that system going and continue to expand the solution to other communities. So, with co-founding it with my father, we were both very passionate about entrepreneurship. How can we bring entrepreneurship to the equation with finding a water solution? So our mission and passion is as much about entrepreneurship and creating this opportunity for local entrepreneurs as it is about the water solution. And I think those two things, when they come together, is what allows a solution to be permanent and really lasting.
Sunil, as I heard, you said there are no financial problem. we can bring the money. We will go into funding later. And then Galen now, he said, actually, there are no technological problems. So what were the challenges beside the corruption, etc.? And how did you bring it easy to make this project?
So when I say if we talk about there being no financial challenges, let me put it this way. There is more than enough money in the world to solve the water crisis. The water crisis is not an insurmountable problem by any means. It's not even an insurmountable problem by 2030, as SDG 6 says. But we are nowhere near being on target to achieve that. We shouldn't be kidding ourselves. The problem, again, speaking about our area in small rural areas, is really one of last mile execution. You know, it is hard work. It is not profitable work. So typically commercial players aren't going there. And I think some of the traditional NGOs and the traditional charities work with a mindset that with an operational mindset or a business mindset, if I may say, that doesn't really work in today's world, that doesn't allow them to expand. And the way that we work in terms of trying to overcome the finances is our model is we have very generous donors and partners who sponsor our sites. They pay for the capital equipment. But very, very critically, we charge for the water on the ground. It's important that we get our village consumers to understand there is a value for water. It's a very small price, but they have to, in principle, pay for something. But that revenue stream is enough to make us financially efficient to be able to at least maintain those sites. We'll never get cost recovery on the hardware, but as long as we can cover our operating costs, we have a chance to be able to build these things and then sustain them. So it's really about being able to deploy capital, but it's also about people understanding that if you're deploying capital to have this big social impact, don't expect fantastic financial returns. Expect fantastic social returns, but not necessarily financial returns in the areas that we're working.
I would love to explore now your experiences. I will start with Galen. Galen, we are dealing with a resource that is not renewable, that is not infinite, that is water, and it is precious, actually, for every human being on the planet. You are in Africa. You talked about the corruption, the lack of, enthusiasm to find a solution. What was your approach to provide for clean water for the population in Africa?
Thanks a lot. I think it's important to first, like Sunil alluded to, differentiate between all the different diversity in Africa across the continent. You have a huge water challenge that spans dense urban areas with higher purchasing power all the way to the smallest villages. So in Jibu's case, we're focused on the urban dense areas where the drinking water is not safe, but there's less of a water scarcity issue. And where Sunil's working, if I may, Sunil, you can correct me when you jump in too. He's working in places where there's a dual challenge. There's a drinking water challenge and often even a water scarcity challenge, and it's the hardest to reach places. It's the very last mile in rural villages. So you have this whole span of issues that are being faced by the rapidly growing African population across sub-Saharan Africa. And as far as how we're approaching the renewable aspect of water, it has to be very site-specific. So, how you're approaching sustainability in a city, for instance, is very different than how it needs to be approached in a rural village. And then the water access in the area matters a lot. So, for instance, we're operating in 7 countries across East Africa. How we approach sustainability in Kenya, Tanzania is very different than how we approach it in Rwanda, Uganda, where we have an excess of freshwater access. From how we approach it, we have to look at it end to end. We have to look at it from the water technology perspective. How efficient is the water technology in preserving water? And then all the way down to what is the environmental impact of our distribution system to end customers? Because ultimately, if we have an inefficient distribution system, then even if we're saving water in the process, the environmental damage could outweigh the efficiency that you gain from the water treatment system itself. So I I didn't answer your question very clearly, except to say it's a very big, gnarly challenge that spans so many different, geographies and specific.
So for each geography,
issues.
will have its own strategy or vision or approach. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's right.
Okay, I will go back for this because I need to understand what did you exactly to provide people where how you built this business model for Africa to provide them with clean water. Sunil, actually, Galen, he emphasized on something that is very important. There are a rapid growth of population and economy in Africa. I think this is another challenge for you to provide with a source that is very limited. The consumption of water is souring. There are not enough water. What was your solution?
So I'm going to try and keep it brief because that can be an hour's discussion right there. So exactly as we alluded to. First of all, we are talking about Africa, but Africa is a 50+ country continent, and even within the countries, you talk about North and South Ghana, North and South Kenya, completely different environments, dry versus rainy. So the water access issue is very, very different. Again, talking about the rural areas, we want to try and bring these people. We talk about growing populations, and we talk about maybe growing urban populations. But let's say the rural poor are struggling to even have access to get themselves into urban environments. They're struggling to even have a basic education. They are really being left behind. The fact that they don't have water, it's a big gender empowerment issue because often it's women and girls who have to go and collect the water. That means a lot of girls can't go to school because they're collecting water. There's a whole generation of people still being left behind as the world is moving ahead. So we actually don't have too much of an issue in accessing water. We typically access groundwater, and a lot of the dryness is actually happening in the urban areas where there is overconsumption of water. All water is actually being taken. 70% of water is actually taken by industry and agriculture. Drinking water at a global level is actually the minority of our usage. But when we're in rural areas, we actually don't have a shortage of getting water once we drill down. But it's a matter also of and again, if we talk about different geographies, Galen's absolutely right. In Kenya, we have an issue of dealing with scarcity of water for the rural poor. In Ghana, many of the communities we serve with clean water from the ground are living maybe not even 10 meters from a river. So they have access to water, but the question is then clean water. A big part of us giving them clean water and asking them to pay even a couple of US cents for a jerry can is they say, well, there's a free water source over here, and why should I pay over here? And there's a big part of education in telling people that you go to that water, you're going to get guinea worm, or you're going to get river blindness, you're going to get bilharzia, you're going to all sorts of diseases there, and really try to explain them. So it's very hard to explain all the different situations in one go. But in terms of shortage, we typically are not facing too much of an issue. It's about educating people why they should be paying for water.
Another point that you brought up that is very important, that is the pollution. So Galen, probably there are water, like he said, Sunil, it's 10 meters or less even from the population. The problem is it is not clean. It is contaminated water with poor sanitation, for example. So it creates a lot of diseases, unfortunately, for those people. It is inappropriately managed water and sanitation services that exposes those people, and they are in real need for the clean water. So when the matter is about cleaning those sources of water, what do you do?
Well, you have to customize the water technology to the water source, and you have to continue to test the water source to make sure it continues to treat that technology. So in urban environments where you have major pollution happening, it's actually a major issue, because typically in natural environments, you could have seasonality, this or that, but you could typically design a water treatment system that could handle that whole range of seasonality possibilities. But in an urban environment, if you have, a unusual chemical being dumped into the groundwater supply, that's a major risk for health, and it affects, it seeps eventually through boreholes throughout any city. So it becomes a liability for everyone. Imagine if someone has a home water treatment system and there's an unknown contaminant that the system wasn't built for in the first place. So it's a major issue that can't just be solved with the water technology after the fact. It has to be cut off at the source, so that there's not illegal industrial polluting of groundwater.
So, Galen, you are faced with this issue. The same thing for Sunil. What do you do about it? Is it an extra cost for you, or you are cooperating with the governments in places to try to find this solution, or it is finally your own responsibility to do it?
So first of all, it's our own responsibility. I don't want to say we don't get government cooperation, but the problem of dealing with 785 million people or more is so vast. We just have to move. So when we can get some government cooperation, that's great. But otherwise, we just take it on. Exactly to the point that Galen said, that it's so nuanced, the issue of water pollution in different areas. It's so specific. In our situation, it could be too much arsenic, or it could be too much fluoride, or it could be too much iron. And again, there's no affordable one-size-fits-all solution. But very critically for us, because we are running a lot of remote sites in rural areas, for us to monitor the filtration systems is very, very hard. For example, we might tell a community, we're putting in this really cool, fancy system, we're going to filter out everything, and we are serving you clean, potable water. Now, those systems necessarily require filter changes, backwashes, cartridge changes, various things. Now, if our caretakers in the field forget, neglect, deliberately don't change the cartridges, Project Maji is now selling dirty water where we promised not to. So we've actually just, if you like, even copped out of that and just said, we are checking the water at the borehole source. If the borehole water at source is clean and potable, we serve it. If it's not, we do not serve, and we do not deliver that. Until we can find a foolproof way to deliver and filter water where we can check it and make sure we can't be out of the picture if something goes wrong, we would rather just make sure the water is clean at source and serve that. And we go back every year and we check those sources and make sure there's no contaminants that have come in. But frankly, that's our easier solution.
That is the easiest solution. It's very complicated, Sunil, and a big responsibility, honestly. Galen, what is the business model for you that you implemented through all the areas that you provided them with clean water?
Yeah, thanks. So we finance, train, and equip entrepreneurs to launch drinking water franchises. And what that means is we basically install a water treatment system customized to that local water source in a high visibility retail front in dense urban areas. And then that allows the entrepreneur to take water from that source, treat it, package the water in reusable bottles, so usually 20-liter bottles, and then distribute to about a 1 kilometer exclusive area that they basically have bought rights to as a franchisee. So we've basically adapted a typical franchise model by combining the financing component. So in a normal franchising system, the franchisees brings the capital and builds out a franchise according to the specifications of a franchisor. In our case, we build out the franchise. We have a co-investment requirement, so there's skin in the game from the local entrepreneur, but we build out the franchise, and then they pay us back over time for that investment through a flat fee per liter based on the water meter in their water production system. So essentially, we invoice almost like a utility company across all of these micro water production plants, and essentially we, for every franchise, it's really critical to have hyper convenient access for customers in the area. So typically, a production franchise that we launched, one of the ones I was just describing with the water production plant, they service about 50 to 100 retailers within that 1 kilometer area, where customers can then exchange their empty bottles and replace them with full refills. So that way customers are only paying for the water in the long term and not paying for plastic waste or empty bottles like that. So basically it's, our specific model is very well suited for urban environments where putting in place the piping structure or decentralized, water treatment plants and piping structure in a neighborhood is very difficult. So that's why we distribute through reusable bottles and refills, usually 20 liters. And
yeah, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask a question. I will stay with you, Galen, because you are an utility company. You are like Diwa in Dubai. But very small and private. Isn't it the job, the responsibility of a government?
It's a fantastic question, and I know Sunil will have thoughts about this too. It's an awkward dynamic here. So, I think to be fair to local governments, you have urbanization happening and incredible population growth that I think any other place besides maybe UAE in the world could not handle. If New York was growing at the rate of Nairobi in Kenya, it would be the Armageddon. It would feel like Armageddon inside the city. You have a birth rate of 6 children per woman, then plus the urbanization happening. So just the urban infrastructure cannot keep up with the population growth happening. So I think the places where governments can find financing is typically for traditional utility configurations where there's a central water treatment plant and then a large infrastructure bringing that to every household. But my view is that with the rate of population growth, that type of solution is not feasible to service everybody fast enough. So that's why we have a decentralized model and why it's privatized. And in our case, like I said early on in the conversation, is as important for us to see the impact we're having through the entrepreneurial opportunity we're creating as it is the access to water that we're offering. So in our case, decentralizing that ownership and making many profitable small businesses that manage these systems is really critical because it's facilitating economic growth alongside serving the typical role that utility would.
Okay, Sunil, I understand what Galen said about the challenges that are faced by the governments in Africa, but isn't it an awkward relationship, honestly? You are coming and giving them solution that I know it's complicated and not easy, but they should have thought about it.
Well, they should have, and I won't say they don't, but I think Galen put it more diplomatic than I did. I think it's right. It's not negligence of governments. Don't get me wrong. He's absolutely right because the challenges faced by these governments is vast. They are dealing with massive populations, growing populations, many issues, and they are in many cases just hugely underfunded. You need to grow economies, or governments need to grow economies with taxation. If you don't have the basic GDP, you're not going to get enough taxation, or you get into that trap. Let's tax everyone at 60%, and that's just not going to work. So, there has to be this better support with aid. I think there's a whole discussion to be had, which maybe is for another conference, a whole discussion to be had around impact investing, where dollars can come in with a different mindset, not an aid mindset, but with an investment mindset, but maybe not searching for super high returns. Maybe look for subsidized returns, or maybe look even just to recycle that money, get it back without an interest rate. But that money can be put to a lot of good. So while I don't want to knock government saying that not enough is being done for a huge plethora of reasons. So it's not simple to say that they're not willing to. They are willing to. We do get support when we talk to. I can walk into the door of the water minister in the countries that we work in. We're very much welcomed.
Okay.
But there's limited work that they can do. But that's why they welcome people like us to do that.
So that was my question, but I think you answered. It's not an awkward relationship, but it's cooperation, or at least they let you work. Is this correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. I want to stay with you, Sunil, because because I read it and I want our audience to, I want to share it with the audience. So you came and in Ghana, you said, I don't want to see any more those hand pumps. They are not fitted in the 21st century and for any human being in the world. And I know here in Dubai, you try to find a solution technologically. I don't understand it, but I thought it's not very, very complicated and it is cost efficient. Actually, you went there and you took it with you and you built it, of course, implemented in an area, and you start seeing if it is adaptable to that area and the people there. Tell me about it.
Sure. Again, a number of lessons, but I'll try and keep it to the point and brief. But yes, we designed our first Maji kiosk sitting in a conference room in Dubai, and the fundamental premise was solar-powered pumps. So instead of this ridiculous hand pump, we use solar-powered energy because there's abundant sunshine across the continent, obviously, and that solar energy drives the pump, pulls up water into a large storage tank. And then gravity feeds water from that storage tank to taps, and that serves the people. Subsequently, while watching the community, we've brought the size down, made it more efficient, brought the cost down. We've gone with automated cashless payment systems, so our cash collection is more efficient. So it's really helped us able to sort of have a good, affordable, standardized solution. And by having a standardized solution, and I come from a consumer products background, yes, it allows us to rapidly roll out across the continent. So we're running more than 120 sites now. We'll cross 250 sites by the end of this year. And our plan is at least until 2030 to keep doubling and doubling and doubling every year.
I will go now to the reaction of the people that you are serving for them for years now, clean water, and I will start with Galen. Galen, who is first affiliated to this very ambitious project that you have, and they came on board in this business model? Who are those people?
Yeah, we have primarily impact investors that have supported us, and they've invested through equity, through donations, and through debt. So one of our larger partners is Danone, the dairy company based out of France. Another is Hilton Foundation. Hilton Foundation, built from the global hotel chain. Their foundation focuses on water access. And then we've also had a number of impact investment funds that have come in and invested in Jibu. And our goal with how we've run the company is to make money and make impact without compromising either, because our belief is that unless we have a commercially attractive model, we won't be able to scale the solution across the entire world. And so that's been a really core component of the value proposition. So when we produce stakeholder reports, we actually share the same report with financial investors, with donors, with debt providers, and our impact metrics are shared alongside the financial health metrics.
I understand about the funding. I will talk about it also later on, but I wanted to talk about your partner on the ground, actually, because your business model is to have a partner on the ground. Those people I'm interested, who are they? Are they freshly graduated, businessmen? I don't know, housewives, maybe? I don't know. Who are they?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Yeah, that is the most important. I mean, the whole model is built in partnership. So yeah. So let me first share our selection model is a sort of date before we marry model. So we require that a potential franchise candidate first operate as a reseller and have that partnership with an existing franchise owner. So they basically buy water from an existing franchise owner, resell it from a resale point in that community. Based on their volumes and the relationship they have with that franchisee, they're then allowed to apply for a franchise. And so that selection process has meant we've had a very broad type of profile of partners. So we have a top performing franchisee who has her MBA in Rwanda, and then we also have a top performing franchisee who was previously a security guard. So it's a very broad spectrum of skill sets, and it's really, how well can the person manage the business, their team, and really be trusted for the quality control aspect and ultimately be able to sell water in that neighborhood to develop their territory.
I don't think it's only about money. Do you coach them, teach them, train them for this job, entrepreneurial, noble job, let's say?
That's the most important job we do, actually. So as a franchisor, it's all about training. Of course, we also do things like the supply chain, regulatory support, and the technologies, and all these other things. But at the heart of it all is the training for the franchise owners and for their staff.
Sunil, I want to ask you as well about the people. How did they react when you changed the usual system that they have been using for decades?
So that's exactly the point that drives me forward. You know, I always say my biggest reward is seeing people's smiles. And every time we're in communities, every time we switch on a tap, it is, you know, however hard it is, whatever challenges we had, raising the funds, building the site.
You're bringing tear to my ear, my eyes, Sunil, honestly. My goodness, it's amazing. Yeah.
Let's bring you out to one of the villages sometime, because it is so rewarding to see that tap turned on and water flowing, and the way they react. So no, and that's really what drives me and my team, and it keeps us going forward more than anything.
I'm gonna launch one question that came on the chat, and I think it's Sunil. You answered this question, but I want to ask it again. I think free water security is the best solution in the near future using solar system. So, what do you think about it? That I know you answered because this is the system that you are using, but still, I want another answer from you about this.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things there. Using solar power makes a lot of sense, especially especially in the global south, generally where people are more poor. Sunshine is abundant, so solar is really almost a no-brainer to me in that context. The question about free water is a really contentious one, and it's a core principle that Project Maji stands on. Not free water, but in fact that we must charge for water. Now, to me, the whole necessity of charity in the world, charity has a very important place to play in the world. You know, we're seeing a huge new refugee crisis coming out of Ukraine. Yeah. We've obviously got tons over the Middle East, North Africa as well. But to me, things like refugee crisis, weather emergencies, storms, etc., there's a place for just straight charity to come. But where we're trying to build infrastructure, where we're trying to build and change communities, I think there has to be some kind of a financial model behind it for two reasons, as I think I said. One, for us, it's really important, whatever price we charge for the water, it doesn't matter in principle, but there has to be a price because there is a cost to bring this equipment, to maintain it. People have to value that. So if you give things free, we have seen it in some of our early sites. We didn't charge in the beginning, then we had to start charging because we did see a big difference in how people reacted to these sites, if they were free or not. So it's not a question of how much we charge, but there should be a charge. And then secondly, just to keep it financially sustainable so that otherwise, how are we going to maintain it? You know, we have salaries to run, we have trucks to run, we have spare parts to provide. We can't always rely on donors.
That is great because it brings awareness to the importance of water, even though they know it is important resources. But this avoid abuse of water, and of course, this is very important. I will link this point with you, Galen, with another question that pumped in now. How can we increase people's awareness of the sustainability of water resources?
Yeah, well, I think that it's really up to marketing. I think from our experience, when we've tried to go the education route and sort of teach customers or do trainings and all of that stuff, it's far less effective than making the right thing sexy and sort of attractive through marketing and campaigns. So for us, when we try to make that kind of behavior change, we incorporate it into an ad. So how we're how we're showing someone using water and how precious we make the water look, all of that is much more effective than doing an education campaign saying, don't use water. I think in our case, we are focused on...
I think it's more don't waste water because we all use water, correct? Don't waste water.
Yeah, exactly. Don't waste. Exactly. I think in our case, we've really tried to, for franchisees, it's really important to establish a brand so that there's a willingness to pay by customers, so that franchisees can maintain their systems, pay their staff, all that stuff. And so that does bring a innate value to the water that disincentivizes people from wasting it. Also, we're focused on drinking water rather than domestic all-purpose water. So I think most of the water waste that happens is in relation to the domestic use purposes. So cleaning and showering and all of that type of stuff.
I think this point, just to emphasize, it's not only valid for Africa, right, Sunil? If we are in California, for example, where there's a problem of water, or in Canada where there's enough water, awareness about the importance of saving water and not waste it is very important anywhere, and it needs those kind of campaigns and marketing that Galen just brought up now, correct?
Absolutely, and I think one thing you said, the water is not recyclable. It is a finite resource, but it actually does recycle. Now, it can take decades, it can take centuries to recycle, but there is an amount of water on Earth that we can use. But we do in the Western world use water extremely inefficiently. Showers, washing machines, flushing toilets, all these things are actually, when you look at them, actually ridiculous wastes of water. It requires such an immense amount of investment. Again, it requires buy-in from consumers to go change their washing machines, redo the plumbing in all their houses, change all the toilets in their houses, etc. And it's prohibitively expensive, but it might be something that we're going to have to start to drive people to, because we cannot continue to consume water in the Western world
the way it is now, the way it is, absolutely cannot. Actually, it's amazing you answered the question that was just popped up in the chat. You answered already. Is there a relationship between daily life activities, human behavior, and water security? Yes, of course, you just explained it. Let me talk numbers now and talk money. How cost is this? I want to, earlier you talked about the goal 6 target. Let me redefine this one from the UN. It is ending the global water crisis and reaching everyone with clean water, sanitation, and hygienists expected to cost, this is the goal, and it is expected to cost approximately $114 billion a year until 2013. So far, what is allocated to this matter and goal 6 is around $13 billion a year. How do you deal with the lack of funding? I know you told me the money in the word is enough to find a solution for water supply in our lifetime, but how are you dealing with the funding?
To me or to Galen?
To you. I will start with you and then we go to Galen.
So we work with some very generous donors and partners. We work with like Galen. We work with Danone Communities. We work with the Red Cross. We work with local entities in Ghana and Kenya, and they help us to go forward. But of course, if you're relying on a donation model to suddenly come up with $100 billion plus, that's very, very hard. I'll throw in some politics here, and throw out numbers like, the US defense budget is $2 trillion a year, and we're looking for 140 odd billion. So that's what I mean. In the scheme of things, it's not an insurmountable challenge. But also, I would even challenge the number that the UN puts out there of 140 billion. I think it's a lot less. Again, because I think that the way they're looking at it is with a traditional charitable model of donating infrastructure. But if you can do it with investment funds and recycling impact investment, or even real investment, depending how profitable it is, the number suddenly comes down dramatically. But there has to be a focus behind it. And right now, it baffles me why there isn't. Because if we run out of water, that's game over, frankly, for everyone.
One question that came to my mind, Galen, is there, I know you named a lot of donor, very generous. Is there any sustainable way to fund it? Not to have a big, for example, donation this year and then next year you cannot find anything?
Oh, exactly. That's our goal. And over time, we've had very few donations. Now we have primarily equity investments and debt investments where investors are investing because of the impact, but also because they want a financial return. So again, for me, you can't, and I think the UN has rightly paired now water and jobs together. You can't really divorce some of these systemic issues around access to water or other utilities from the need for economic development in the areas where we're working. So I can't agree with Sunil more that we fundamentally should charge something for the water so that local economic development is happening and decreases dependency on foreign aid, because free water is not really free. It's creating dependency on someone somewhere. So for it to really last and be a permanent solution, it needs to be self-contained, localized, and economically supported in that environment.
Sunil, there's a question here in the chat. Tunisia, is it concerned by the project of Maji? And Tunisia didn't ask this question. I don't know who sent it, but is Tunisia concerned?
To the best of my knowledge, all of the African continent and a huge part of the Middle East definitely has water poverty issues. But it's one of the issues that we face is how far can we go? We're in Ghana and Kenya. We are going to start operating in Uganda by Q3 this year through a partnership. We're talking to a couple of other companies, but the problem is, this is not a problem that's going to be solved by one person. It's not going to be Galen and me who are going to magically solve this whole problem.
Definitely. But I think the question is Maji is cooperating with other partner in Tunisia. I think this is what was the question.
No. Ghana and Kenya, and we're starting Uganda. That's where we are.
The question. Sunil, another question.